Burbules, en Illinois, en la Facultad de Educación de Illinois. Entonces voy a pasar a presentar, ¿sí?, algo que a los invitados, por supuesto, que nos acompañan, y luego la forma en que vamos a trabajar. Nicolás, el doctor Nicolás Burbules, es profesor emérito de la cátedra Edward William Jane Marr Goodsell en el Departamento de Política Educativa, Organización y Liderazgo de la Universidad de Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, USA. Sus principales áreas de investigación son la filosofía educativa y la ética en la comunicación, la enseñanza a través del diálogo y la tecnología en la educación. Bueno, publicó numerosos capítulos de libros, artículos, conferencias múltiples, porque ha sido invitado around the world, alrededor del mundo, es miembro de la Academia Internacional de Edu, que se va a referir básicamente a, un minutito, la inteligencia artificial y educación, los cambios teóricos y prácticos del trabajo científico. El doctor va a tener de 8 a 10 minutos en la primera vuelta para exponer sus ideas, ¿verdad? Luego vamos a tener a Patricia Ávila en la misma dinámica y finalmente Danilo. Recuerden, vamos a ser rigurosas en cuanto al tiempo. ¿Por qué? Porque disponemos solamente 2 horas de trabajo. Muy bien. Los invitados van a tener la posibilidad, y es bienvenida, de formularse preguntas para esta disputatio de expertos. 2 preguntas que vamos a registrar y que invitamos al público que las registren más allá de lo que se les ocurra preguntar, porque no está claro, porque siguen habiendo incógnitas, etc. De este modo vamos a la segunda vuelta de nuestra disputatio, donde ¿qué es lo que pasa? Nuevamente la misma dinámica, con otras aristas, ¿verdad?, que comprometen al fenómeno de la inteligencia artificial y cómo la investigamos científicamente, porque parece que los modelos no tradicionales han quedado chicos, se han reducido. Entonces es la búsqueda de alternativas para ello. La palabra al doctor Burbules, y cuando estemos por ahí yo voy a hacer una frenada, ¿sí? Es un gusto, Nick, escucharte.
Thank you. You ready for me to start?
Yes, of course. Yes.
Bueno. Hello, everybody. Let me start with my thank yous. Thank you to Beatrice and everyone for the invitation to come and talk with you. Thank you all for coming. As some of you know, I've been to Argentina, Buenos Aires many times. I wish I could be there in person to have this conversation with you live. But I'll be talking today about the impact of artificial intelligence on 2 areas of scholarship, the research process and the publishing process. And the format that we have is that I will speak for about 10 minutes about issues in research. Then we're going to have a conversation. Then we'll come back and I'll talk again about 10 minutes about issues in publishing. Let me also thank the translator and the translation services. I do not speak Spanish, unfortunately, even after all these visits to your country. I know it's an incredible privilege and benefit to me to have people translate my work so that I can learn from and talk with people around the world. I do a lot of these kinds of lectures, and every time I do it, I try to thank the translators because they do really important work, necessary work for me. Finally, I want to say I am not an expert on artificial intelligence. That will become very clear to you. Like probably most of you, I am running as fast as I can to learn about AI. It's obviously going to transform our work, not necessarily for the better, maybe in some ways for the worse, whether it's research or teaching. It's a tremendous challenge. I think we're all struggling to understand this challenge. And I've been getting a lot of invitations to speak on this topic. Every time I speak, it's a chance for me to learn something more about these new technologies, what they can do, what they can't do, and the challenges that they present to us. So I hope you find these comments of interest, and I'm looking forward to our conversation around them. Okay, so first of all, topics in the area of research. So there's more and more AI, I'll just say AI if that's okay. There's more and more AI generated research. Some estimates say that more than half of all journal submissions now are artificial intelligence. That maybe even be understating the numbers because it's actually very, very difficult to identify AI generated work or partly AI generated work. My guess is that by far the vast majority of papers now use AI in some way, not necessarily to write the entire text, but in some way. And some authors are more transparent about that than others. I'll talk about the challenges this presents to journal editors. I'm a former journal editor myself in the second part of my comments. Nearly all of the new AI generated research comes from analyses of already existing public data sets. It's the kind of analysis that's relatively easy for AI to do. AI is very good at pattern recognition. AI is very good at statistical analysis. I think it's less good at some other aspects of research. I'll talk about that later. But this is the first thing I want to talk about. I've got 3 topics I want to discuss under the area of research. The first is data itself. So one question we should be having as consumers of this research is, where does this data come from? If these are publicly available data sets, who created them? How were they created? Were they done effectively or by qualified people? Are the data themselves reliable data? We often don't see that because the data itself wasn't produced by the AI. The AI is drawing from data that already exists. And there's 2 problems with this. One, I think, is pretty obvious. We don't always know how reliable the data is, first of all. Second, I think there are ethical obligations. And I think a lot about issues of research ethics. I'll talk about those in a minute. But I think there are ethical obligations to be transparent about what your data sources are, where they came from, what their strengths or shortcomings might be, as opposed to taking the data as a given and thinking that AI is simply analyzing the data that's already there. I think if a regular researcher was telling you, I'm going to write a paper analyzing some data, but I'm not going to tell you where the data came from, you wouldn't have very much confidence in them. But a lot of AI generated research is not very transparent about the sources or quality of the data that it's based on. That's one question. Another question, can AI create new data? That's not the characteristic of most AI generated research now. What about experimental data? Could AI generate experimental data? Well, I have some serious doubts about that. Is there such a thing as an AI lab? I mean, how would that actually work at the functional level? Could AI generate survey data? Here, I think there might be some possibilities. I could imagine AI generating a set of survey questions, and I could imagine AI, if it had a population, sending those questions out to people and then analyzing the survey data that came in. It would be relatively quantitative work. You'd have to look again at the quality of the survey questions, and just as you would with any other kind of survey research. But this is an area where, in principle, I could imagine AI producing data sets, survey data sets of some quality and reliability. What about more ethnographic or qualitative research? Could AI do that kind of research? Could AI do classroom observations of teachers? You can imagine a camera set up in a room, but could AI actually observe and analyze what the teachers are doing or saying for the purpose of, let's say, an ethnographic study? Could an AI do interviews? So AI might do a survey or survey questions. Could an AI actually do an interview? There are, I mean, most of you have probably done this, interacting with an AI chatbot on a customer service page, or where the AI is actually having something that looks like a conversation with you. Could that work as a form of interview to gather data for the purposes of a qualitative or ethnographic study? Here, I'm more skeptical because, and I'll say more about this in just a second. Well, I'll say it now. So I think when we're talking about more qualitative data, interviews, observations, and so on, one thing that AI is being used for already by qualitative researchers is to do coding, to take a rubric of classifications of, let's say, a set of teacher behaviors, and then classifying or coding a set of data in terms of that rubric. Um, uh, I think AI can do that kind of thing. I think AI could provide a kind of summary. But of course, we expect more than just coding and summary in the analysis of qualitative data. Could AI do interpretation? Could it actually interpret the meaning, the context, the experiences, the human understanding behind not only what people are saying, that's a descriptive task, but what they mean when they say certain things, or what they might not actually be saying, but an experienced interviewer would know what's not being said, what's not being talked about, or something that we say in English, you're reading between the lines. It's not explicitly stated, but you can say, yes, what they were really saying was they don't really like their school principal. They're not going to say that straight out, but when you interpret what they're saying, it's pretty clear that that's what they mean. Could AI do analysis of that sort of, not only the literal meaning of terms, but the implied meanings behind terms? I'm somewhat skeptical about that. My second topic under the area of research is the issue of reproducibility. As I think all of you know, reproducibility is one of the central premises of scientific research. We don't think a scientific research study is of much value if it's not reproducible. That's one of the criteria that we use. And as I suspect that many of you or most of you are aware of, there's a general problem now in scientific research in general. I'm not talking about AI yet. There's a general problem of reproducibility in scientific research in areas like psychology, medicine, biology. They're finding, and this is not exactly a new problem, but there's been a lot of discussion around it in recent years, that in fact, the studies look well done and professional, but when you try to reproduce them, you don't get the same results. So what's the reliability of the original article if it can't be reproduced? I think that this is even a bigger problem in the area of social research. You even have things like many qualitative studies are not really meant to be reproducible at all. It's analysis of this classroom or this teacher or this group of teachers. And it's meant to be a true story about them, but it wouldn't necessarily be a true story about a different school or a different kind of, a different group of teachers. Some people don't like qualitative research for that reason. But the statistics that I looked at this morning is that over half of research studies are being found not to be reproducible. So when you think about the amount of money that governments and other people invest in this research, when you think about the number of professors and scholars involved in research, and the number of CVs where people are listing this research, I suspect most people don't put on their CVs, I published this paper, but nobody could reproduce it. People don't say that. And so this challenge of reproducibility, let me give you the cynical view, could be that half the research out there isn't really any good. That would be the worst case scenario. If it's not reproducible, we don't have any reason to have confidence in it. That would be a very negative interpretation, but people are very concerned about this. Now, with AI-generated research, these issues are even more severe. When you get study or an analysis from AI, I said this earlier, there's often a lack of transparency about what AI did to get those results. Beatrice?
Así que te escuchamos, Patricia. Adelante.
Bien, estaba saludando. Buenos días por este lado. Buenas tardes en el Cono Sur. Agradezco la invitación para participar en esta mesa redonda, pues con tan destacados especialistas. Con Beatriz nos une una amistad de muchos años y nos hemos acompañado a lo largo de la vida, compartiendo diferentes espacios académicos. Voy a comenzar hablando sobre, en esta primera intervención, sobre la inteligencia artificial y los nuevos modos de producir conocimiento. Como bien decía el doctor Burbulés, el hablar hoy de inteligencia artificial en educación, pues implica ir mucho más allá del uso de nuevas aplicaciones tecnológicas. Lo que está ocurriendo representa un cambio, pues, mucho más profundo. Estamos asistiendo a una transformación de las formas de producir conocimiento, de investigar y de comprender los procesos educativos. Tradicionalmente, la investigación científica ha seguido procesos relativamente lineales, que van desde la formulación del problema, la revisión de la literatura, el trabajo de campo, el análisis e interpretación, en fin. Hoy estos procesos comienzan a modificarse mediante sistemas capaces de procesar grandes volúmenes de información, identificar patrones complejos, generar modelos predictivos e incluso colaborar en la construcción del conocimiento. Preservar el rigor metodológico, la creatividad intelectual y el pensamiento crítico no es tarea sencilla cuando la IA asume parte del trabajo analítico, aunque no es lo mismo automatización que producción del conocimiento, como bien señalaba el doctor Burbules. Enfrentarnos a un cambio de paradigma que demanda nuevas categorías de análisis nos lleva a que la inteligencia artificial deja de ser un recurso aislado para convertirse en un componente del ecosistema educativo mucho más complejo, donde convergen personas, tecnologías, instituciones, datos e incluso redes de colaboración. La pregunta actual no es cómo incorporar la IA a la investigación, sino cómo rediseñar los modelos educativos para que la tecnología fortalezca los procesos pedagógicos, sin sustituir, entre otros elementos, la mediación en los nuevos eh, docentes en formación que están generando conocimientos. La complejidad consiste en integrar dimensiones de tipo pedagógico o de carácter tecnológico, organizacional y culturales, pues de manera simultánea. Si tenemos en cuenta que existe una gran diversidad de contextos, por ejemplo, en Latinoamérica, el problema se hace mucho más complicado. No es solo la velocidad del cambio tecnológico o la naturaleza interdisciplinaria de la IA. Hay implicaciones éticas, de gobernanza, de aseguramiento de la calidad, de protección de datos, entre otros aspectos. Y además, cuando hablamos de América Latina, es hablar de muchas Américas, pues hay una gran diversidad de características. Mientras algunas instituciones avanzan de manera estratégica y con visiones de largo plazo, otras lo hacen de forma mucho más fragmentada, asistemática y empujadas por coyunturas. Y eso sin detenernos a temas de infraestructura o accesibilidad. Por ello, promovemos que las universidades aprendan unas de otras, compartan experiencias, construyan programas regionales y desarrollen conocimiento colectivo mediante el trabajo en red. La inteligencia artificial abre posibilidades inéditas para potenciar estas redes mediante análisis colaborativos, la construcción compartida del conocimiento y la producción científica distribuida. Además, los cambios tecnológicos evolucionan mucho más rápido que nuestras capacidades institucionales para regularlos y comprenderlos. Necesitamos aprender a investigar fenómenos que cambian mientras los estamos estudiando. Necesitamos metodologías más flexibles, investigación colaborativa internacional y nuevas formas de producir evidencia científica. Pero ello, o mejor dicho, por ello, la cooperación regional, la investigación colaborativa o la ciencia abierta, el intercambio de datos y el aprendizaje organizacional, pues resultan ser importantes, aprender unos de otros y seguir adelante. Entendemos que la inteligencia artificial no debe ser concebida como un fin en sí misma, evidentemente, sino como una oportunidad para fortalecer una educación más colaborativa, inclusiva, pertinente y orientada al bien común. Desarrollar la inteligencia colectiva necesaria para utilizarla con sentido ético, con rigor científico y con compromiso social, porque al final el mayor desafío es construir comunidades académicas capaces de pensar críticamente el futuro que se desea construir. La inteligencia artificial debe ayudarnos a transformar nuestra capacidad colectiva para generar conocimientos que contribuyan al desarrollo de nuestras sociedades. Cierro esta primera intervención, que si bien son algunas reflexiones de carácter general, me parecía importante señalarlas. Y señalo que en la actualidad me encuentro colaborando en la Unión de Universidades de América Latina y el Caribe, que es una organización regional con 77 años de existencia, reconocida por la UNESCO como órgano de consulta, con más de 250 universidades afiliadas. Y lo menciono porque en este espacio estamos explorando de manera inicial tres grandes preguntas estratégicas. ¿Cómo cambiar las formas de producir conocimiento científico cuando la IA participa activamente en los procesos de investigación? Otra sería, ¿qué nuevas metodologías y criterios de rigor requieren la investigación educativa en entornos multimodales e inteligentes? Hoy día no se habla de una modalidad educativa, sino de una gran cantidad de modalidades educativas y que además se entrelazan entre ellas. Y en tercer lugar, cómo construir una gobernanza ética y colaborativa que permita que la inteligencia artificial contribuya al bien común de la educación superior en América Latina y el Caribe. Y aquí cerraría esta primera intervención.
Ahora vamos a dar paso a Danilo. Y así como Patricia se refirió fundamentalmente a la producción de conocimientos, que es la centralidad de la investigación científica, Danilo Rodríguez es un investigador, perdón, de Unicampi, y yo ya lo presenté, y su aporte va a tener que ver justamente con esta cuestión. Si la inteligencia artificial en la universidad conduce a repensar el aprendizaje, la enseñanza y la cultura académica. Entonces, vamos a ver cómo esto se impulsa, ¿no es cierto? ¿O no? Así que Danilo, es un gusto y acá estamos contigo.
Thank you. Sorry, my internet is a little bad today. Buenas tardes. Good evening, everyone. So it's a very pleasure to be here in this moment. For me, it's a unique opportunity to share a little bit what I believe and add what I learned during my career. So first, I'd like to express my gratitude to the Professor Dr. Beatriz to invite me to be here. So it's a very happy moment to stay together. I'd like to express my greeting to Dr. Nicholas, Dr. Patricia, and Enrique. It's a very honor to share this moment with you, all of you. So for me, I'd like to start my talk about for the new era of the university. For example, the rethinking, learning, teaching, and academic culture. So to start, I'd like to share a very simple and complex question. How does generative AI change university? So for many years, the universities are building for three main pillars: teaching, research, and extension. So For example, you experience a lot of changes, technology evolution during the year. For example, the print press to the internet, so the personal computer to smartphone. So for us, the technology changed the way the learning is created and shared. So for me, I believe the generative AI is not a simple another tool. It's very, very complex. The generative AI changed the way, how can I change ideas, write text, create image, produce massive data, produce language and computer code, for example. So for me, I have another question. For you are simple adding new technology to high school or enter a new era of teaching and learning? For me, in my perspective, I think generative AI transform four main dimensions of the universe. The first is learning. Like Patricia said, you need to understand or create new technology or new methods to learn. Because, for example, the students are not passive consuming information. Now they are a very strong power tools they are using every day. So to produce knowledge, to produce text, image. So you need to understand how the new way to learn. So for me, the learning is becoming more personality. It's they need to understand my students, my university, to create a new way to learn. Another transformation is teaching. For us, professor, you need to understand it's for example, it's not exclusive search knowledge. The educators it's becoming more learning designer, mentors, facility. It's for me critical guides. You need to help the students critically to using the AI during the daily life. Our responsibility is not only teaching context. You need to teach critical things, ethical research, collaboration, and digital learning. So for me, AI cannot replace human dimension for education. No, because the professor understand how can I teach the student the different way. It's not machine you can change for that. The second is research. For many years, the research have the same pattern. You don't have, for example, when I started to create the paper or some research, you go to the library, for example, or go to the internet to check the data or the new systematic review, for example. But now you have a lot of tools that help us to make it faster. So, but in the same time, you have another problem. For example, a question about transparency, authorship, ethical, and responsible use of AI. So it's very complicated. And finally, for me, it's more new. It's academic culture. University for me need to rethink the way to learn, to teaching, the institutional politicals, curriculum design, and facility develop and student support. For example, 2 weeks ago, I was in India in a fellowship. There, I have an opportunity to meet different professors, different culture, but you have the same problem. How can I integrate AI during the classroom? So it's a very complicated question. It's not simple because it's a global phenomenon. It's not happening in Brazil, in Argentina, in Colombia, in South America, Caribbean, United States. It's everywhere. It's a global phenomenon. So for me, the real question is how can a university teacher, professor using AI ethically and critically? So for me, I believe that universities have essential responsibility to prepare the students, not how can I use the AI, but how can I trust the data that AI produces. critically. For example, the AI using a lot of information on the internet and create fake information. So, but the students sometimes don't know how can I identify that it's a fake or not. So you need to create some rules or ethical procedure to identify. So for me, the technology may transform the education. You know that it's impossible to say the student can use these tools during the class. It's very complicated to ban this AI. You need to integrate this tool during the classroom. For me, the human value it's continue to guide. You can, for example, substitute the way I can interact with my students. For example, here in Brazil, you have I try to new method in my classroom. For example, when I create the test, I can help the students. For example, this activity, you can use AI. This activity, you can't use AI, or you can use it, but it's not in some part of the exercise. This is a kind of technique I can try to use it in my classroom to help the students to say. Because, for example, if I say, you can't using these tools in this methodology, maybe you have a problem because the students are using this technology. So I think, like Patricia said and Professor Nicolas said, it's a very complicated moment, but I think you can stay together to resolve this problem. So I can't, for example, resolve here in Brazil only. You need to learn from different perspectives, for different knowledge, different universities to help the student and help the universe. So for my first talk, this is finished. So again, I'm very happy to be here. So I think it is very important moment to share the knowledge for together. So thank you very much.
Danilo, thank you very much.
It's my pleasure, Dr. Beatriz.
So in this moment, I would like to invite to our guests to maybe ask each other some questions referred to the questions and the ideas and the suggestions that the professor here talked to us. Some questions, one or two questions, or not if you like. To open the discussion through one or two questions, maybe.
I have a question.
The public, if they are, it would be very interesting to write down some questions, because they will have a great role at the end of our roundtable with the specialists. So it's interesting if they have right now to write it on the chat, to know them, and at the end of the roundtable, it will be very interesting to know their suggestions, doubts, incognitas, and so on. I have one.
Well, I have one, if you want me to start.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right.
So Patricia and Danilo both talked about something I didn't talk about here, which is the impact of AI on teaching and learning and the larger challenges to the university. I am interested in that topic. That wasn't my topic today. I agree with, I think, almost everything Danilo said. One of the things that I've been thinking about, I'm retired now, but if I was a teacher now, I would be really troubled by the challenge of, on the one hand, teaching students to use AI as a support for their learning versus using AI as a substitute for their learning. So if you use AI to write a paper, that's not helping you. That's actually weakening you by taking away something that you could learn from and doing it for you. So this change between AI as a support versus AI as a substitute, I think, is a real challenge for teachers. And I'm wondering what Patricia and Danilo think about that.
Can I start? So thank you, Professor Nicola, for this question. Have think this question for a lot of time because, for example, how can I share that it's a support or not support? For example, depends on the activity you can use the AI. It's my opinion. For example, if I say for my student, you need to write your, for example, some personal things. If you use AI, you change it because it's not your personal things. But some activity you can use AI for support because you're using the time is very fast. For example, if you ask for my students, you need to search the internet this problem. The AI it's very helping, but for me it's very challenging. How can I decide it's support or not support? So unfortunately, I don't have this answer because I have the same question for a lot of professors in the different country. They said you need to understand your students. You need to trust in your student. For example, during my classroom, I put some colors in the activity. For example, the red color, you can use the AI because for me, you can use. Some activity, you put a yellow color. You say, you can use it, but a little attention. But the green, you can use. So this is a kind of a strategy I'm using to help the students this you can use or not using for the support, but it's a very, very difficult question. I have this problem every day. When I created my activities, my exercise, I was thinking I need to share my students. You can use or not use, because if you put anything, probably the students are using, and I'm not sure. It's very difficult for me if I say it's you can use it or it's not your producing, the AI produce for you. It's difficult to say. So thank you for the question, and I'm so happy to stay here again.
Somebody would like to answer or to ask another point?
Yes, I can. For example,
I have one, Danilo. I have one.
Sorry,
After you, if you like, short.
Okay, yes, okay.
Bueno,
For Nicholas and Patricia and for Beatriz, I have a question. What's in your country? There is some guides or regulation in your university they help the professor? Because here in Brazil, you have some guideline, but it's not for everyone. It's for specific university. In your country, in your university, you have the same here in Brazil? This is the first question I have.
bueno,
Good question.
en nuestro
Patricia.
caso, más o menos está normado, pero realmente hay mucha, sobre todo si hablamos de niveles superiores, universitarios, hay mucha libertad de cátedra y entonces aquí depende de las habilidades docentes, ¿no? Pero primero aquí entra en juego otro elemento importante, ¿no? Si los docentes están capacitados para hacer un uso adecuado de las tecnologías. Uno de los elementos en los que yo, o de las cuestiones con las que yo me enfrento cuando estoy frente a grupo, es que mi asignatura, mi clase es sobre tecnología educativa o tecnologías en la educación. Y entonces lo primero que hago es, contrario a lo que sucede en todas las aulas, aquí sacan su teléfono o su móvil, abren su computadora y vamos a hacer trabajo haciendo uso de estas herramientas. Aquí la gran labor, y que no es tan fácil, es pensar en algunas estrategias de uso de la tecnología donde ellos analicen, razonen, intercambien ideas, generen propuestas y pues es que la inteligencia artificial es un fenómeno multidimensional, como bien señalaba, ¿no? No podemos decir que no utilicen ciertas herramientas, porque de todas maneras lo van a hacer, y mejor ver, más que satanizarlas, ver cómo las podemos traer a los espacios educativos para que realmente los estudiantes puedan apoyar y respaldar su aprendizaje. Algunas instituciones educativas en México tienen normado el uso de esta herramienta en particular, no está prohibida, más bien es moderada en función de los docentes, ¿no? Porque una cuestión que siempre se habla es, que me parece que lo comenté, que no es suficiente o no basta con disponer de estas tecnologías, sino de justamente que haya algunas políticas institucionales. No sé, ver cómo, repensar aspectos de cómo evaluar los aprendizajes haciendo uso de estas, cómo se van a dar los créditos en esta cuestión de la autoría académica, em, lo que está muy vinculado con la integridad científica, el tema de la protección de datos, que en eso sí se hace mucho, mucho énfasis. Y si bien algunos docentes se apoyan de otras herramientas, ¿sí, Betty?
Ya está. Muy bien, muy, muy.
Ah, ok, ya me estoy soltando, perdón, perdón.
Suena,
Sí.
suena muy interesante porque son diferentes culturas. Y a propósito de ello, by purpose, ¿sí? Eh, Inteligencia artificial para mí es puro lenguaje, puro lenguaje. Entonces, mi pregunta es esta, porque bien puede, ¿sí?, extenderse por todos lados y por diferentes fines, ¿no? Entonces, puede inventar lo que se le ocurra. Entonces, sí, la inteligencia artificial es puro lenguaje, ¿eh? Puede inventar cualquier lenguaje o lo que se le establezca. Y ahí vienen presiones geopolíticas, pueden venir presiones económicas, ¿sí?, que penetran por toda la sociedad. Puede inventar una nueva religión si quiere. ¿Y cómo va a poder abarcar, sí, penetrar, capturar mentes? Sí, ahí está, pensamiento crítico, que se dijo, pero que no se practica, porque las personas viven en una sociedad de consumo, entonces esto presiona mucho, mucho, y tampoco, ahí hablo de educación, ¿no? En el sistema educativo son dos mundos diferentes, el mundo tecnológico y el mundo pedagógico. El mundo pedagógico debería formar personas que se cuestionen. Y yo dudo que esto sea así. Qué sé yo, hay múltiples ejemplos, ¿no? Con las tablets y con los celulares, etcétera, etcétera. A propósito de eso, Wittgenstein dice algo muy interesante también. Los límites de mi lenguaje son los límites de mi mundo. Y esto es aplicable para inteligencia artificial. Pero lo que pasa es que la inteligencia artificial no tiene significado. Este es el tema. No sabe lo que es, por ejemplo, el frío. Yo estoy en el invierno y tengo un frío bárbaro, ¿verdad? La inteligencia artificial no tiene la experiencia empírica del frío. Conoce, sabe mucho de la palabra frío y la escribe en relación a otras palabras de su base de datos. Entonces, esta cuestión del lenguaje, ¿no?, que se mencionó en ustedes, y bienvenido que se haya mencionado, para mí tiene un peso central en la formación de las personas.